Okay, I record so that you have it for yourself. Okay, good. Let me share my screen because I will use my slides to discuss this today. Welcome, everybody. Let me find it. Let me just go fetch my screen. There you go. And click on the start and go back to Zoom, share screen. There it is. Can you guys see my screen? Dimitrimo, can you see my screen? Okay. Can you see my screen? Can somebody give me a thumbs up? Hela, Fotakimu.
Hela, can you
Hela.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can't see you though, but I can hear you.
I'm good. I'm driving. I'm in the car, but I can see you.
Okay, good, good. So you can see my screen?
I can see your screen, but Dimitris is in a cafe with a big screen.
Okay.
And I'm not there, so I'm not sure if
he should as well.
Can see
okay.
You.
Let me start back my recording so that it's stop recording. No. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about troubleshooting pests and diseases sustainably. And really what we're going to do is we're going to talk about smart integrated pest management, or how chemical-free interventions are enough. A lot of people use treatments, and we're going to talk about how that's not only not necessary, but potentially dangerous for your bees. So stick with me and I will illustrate why.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yep.
Okay, because most of the people, they are second language, the English, go a little bit slower.
Okay.
On the English.
It's going to take longer then, but that's okay.
I know, but you know, some people, they need to understand a few things, you know. So.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so my name is Natalie B. And I'm a Texas A&M master beekeeper. I am the previous director of the Texas Beekeepers Association, chairperson for Real Texas Honey, and past president and founder of Hays County Beekeepers Association. And I work with a gentleman named Les Crowder, who is an expert beekeeper, a biologist, and a philosopher. He has been keeping bees for over 50 years, for as long as I've been alive, basically. And I've been keeping bees for 11 years. I'm also the host of the Natural Beekeeping Corner on the podcast called The Hive Jive. If you like podcasts in English, that's a very good beekeeping podcast. And Les is the author of the world-renowned book, Top Bar Beekeeping, Organic Practices for Honeybee Health. So it's an excellent book about horizontal top bar hives. In 2019, I was hired by the Minister of basically technical education in the Republic of the Congo to lead and design their countrywide beekeeping training program for the trade schools. And if you don't know where Brazzaville, Congo is, it's in Central Africa, on the other side of the river from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So I spent over 6 months there, travel all over the country, and got to do beekeeping in Africa, setting up teaching apiaries and building hives for training purposes. I also got to, in 2021, develop a project with my friend Kim for a Houston farm of Congolese refugee women. And it's called the Shamba Yamani, the Farm of Peace. And I trained kids and adults on how to build hives and keep bees and that project is ongoing. We keep doing training. And this past year, I did a virtual training with Winrock, which is a volunteering international organization. And that was in Ikom, Nigeria, excuse me. So it was a virtual training. I did all the training through Zoom, and I taught about 30 women and some men in the group as well. As you can see on that banner, my logo is up there. So it was really great. They built horizontal tabar hives out of barrels and kept bees in those to provide food and income to their communities. So that's a little bit of who I am and what I do. My passion is community outreach and natural beekeeping. So very often you hear that if you don't treat bees with chemicals, they will die. And that's true from various doctors and very smart people. But what happens is that it's talking about commercial bees. And so they tell you those bees are going to die. It's a scare tactic to push you to treat your bees with chemicals. And I'm here to tell you that's not the truth. If you start with good bees, they fend for themselves and they thrive naturally. Tell me if I'm going too fast, okay? I'm trying to speak a lot slower, but so the important part is to remember that, especially in the United States, not all bees are created equal. You have a lot of junk bees, commercial bees that are treated, that are stressed, that are poor quality. And if you want to keep your bees naturally, successfully, you have to use local bees that have not been treated and that are successful naturally. That's called local survivor, as opposed to commercial treated bees that very often come from other locations. They're not local, so they are not adapted to the cycles of weather and forage. So over time, the problem is raising bees without with treatments cause problems. So raising them without treatments produces basically stronger bees. And treating the bees with chemicals, what happens is that it helps weaker bees to propagate, and it allows stronger mites to breed, and it makes them stronger. So it makes the bees weaker and it makes the mites stronger. So that's the opposite of what we want to do. I'm not going to talk to you about the mite bombs. That's a very American concept. But basically, just keep in mind that if you keep your bees naturally, you're allowing them to achieve tolerance of the pests, the mites, which is a big problem. And you allow them to be more resistant to the viruses and the problems that they cause. So today, the core of this presentation is going to be about integrated pest management. So it's a scientific principles of pest management strategies. So it's backed by science, and it has several levels of intervention, which are on the right. You can see educational, cultural, physical, biological, and chemical. So basically, IPM, which is short for Integrated Pest Management, IPM is a pest management strategy that integrates a combination of tactics, not just one. It's a multi approach to the problems. And the goal is to decrease the populations of pests and the negative impact of the diseases. So, and it does that as non-intrusively and as effectively as possible. I apologize, I have allergies. Excuse me, so I can't finish a sentence. So the implications of using IPM and minimize chemical interventions is to try and save the bees without increasing resistance to treatments. The goal is to prevent problems, to identify problems, and to manage the consequences of the problems in a way that's cohesive with bee biology. Think of it in terms of a pyramid, like the food pyramid, where you have to have at the bottom, at the base, a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot of good things. The building blocks of your health are going to be at the bottom of that pyramid. And as you go higher and higher, chocolate and wine might be a little bit more detrimental, so you're not going to use as much, although I like it. And then coffee at the top, maybe too much caffeine might be bad for you, so you shouldn't get a lot of it. I know that in Cyprus, coffee is big, so don't mind me for saying that. But in effect, the higher you go up the pyramid, potentially the more toxic those elements are, and so the less of them, the fewer of them you should consume. Well, that is the same with the IPM pyramid. So remember those 5 levels: educational, cultural, mechanical, biological, and chemical levels can be represented in a pyramid, with the most important base being education. And then another very important step would be cultural. And then above that, you could also use mechanical interventions. And after that, you would have biological and chemical, which should be kept as a last resort because it is toxic. And I'm here to argue that it's best to keep those interventions below the red line right here under mechanical interventions, so that you can prevent problems rather than wait for problems to become bad and intervene with more toxic solutions. If you have questions, by the way, feel free to jump in. I'll be happy to address them, or you can write your questions in the chat window. Okay, so let's break down that pyramid in its 5 levels. The first level we talked about, and you can see on the right side this little guy with the green light, meaning that's what we use in our operations, and that's what we recommend to use, is very important. It is education and knowledge. To be a good, successful beekeeper, you need to understand the biology of the bee. You need to understand the biology of the pests and the diseases, and you need to educate yourself to understand what's happening in your colonies. That means understanding the biology and the life cycles of the pests, as well as that of the bees, because that's the foundation that you need to disrupt the reproduction of the pests, and therefore to limit the damage that it can cause. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. Forimu, tell me if I'm going too fast, okay? So the goal is to understand also how a healthy colony of honeybee looks and how it behaves naturally in a way that's healthy. And all that to intervene, to be able to tell when there's a problem early, to be able to recognize there is a problem that doesn't look like the colony is healthy, or you see signs of pests or diseases. So that's very important, that education component. If you have access to these books, I highly recommend these 2. So The Biology of the Honeybee by Winston is written from the perspective of a biologist, not a beekeeper. So it's an objective look into the biology of the colony. It is not focusing on honey production. It is not focusing on commercial beekeeping or manipulating bees for the beekeeper's profits. It is purely an insight into the colony and its biology. So it's a very, very important book. It is in English and it is a little technical, but it's a very good book for your education. The other book to understand this time the pests and the diseases is this book on the right, the purple book called Honeybee Diseases and Pests from the Canadian Association of Professional Apiculturists. I will do my best to send a copy of each of these two books to Dimitris, and see if he can share with you or lend it to you on occasions. So the implications is that you need to understand the life cycles of the bees and the colonies. You need to recognize the problems early so you can stop them early. You also need to understand that you cannot completely eliminate pests and pathogens. And you can also use their pressure to make your bees stronger. So it's not a bad thing to have some mites. It's not a bad thing to have some hive beetles, as long as the colony stays healthy and learns how to tolerate them and fight them off. Also, it's important to understand that anything you do in a colony of bees, you have an impact on their symbiotic microbiome. Everything is related. Their gut, their microbial and yeast relationships in the colony are in balance. And every time we interfere, we cause problems. So that's another reason why it's important to refrain, to stop putting things into the hives that are not put there by the bees. So understanding the life cycle of the bees, most of you know that for worker bee, it takes about 21 days. The queen lays an egg, it turns into a larvae, which is then capped, and it transforms into an adult bee. And that adult bee goes through different stages, such as cleaning, nurse, taking care of the brood, building comb, defending the hive, foraging for food and water and propolis. So that cycle is very important to understand for the worker bees and the queens, as well as the drones, the male bees. The other important life cycle to understand is that of the entire colony as a whole, meaning the various stages in the year where the colony grows. You can see on that black line, that's the size, the population of the colony in black line. And then it follows the cycles of forage and pollen and nectar here at the bottom in yellow and blue. So when there's more and more food, the population grows, and then it reaches a peak and it goes back down. So from January to summer to December, that's one cycle. So this is the first year, second year, and third year. So understanding that life cycle for your specific location, because it changes based on your weather and your forage, your food, is very important for you to be successful as a beekeeper as well. And it dictates things like swarming and swarm cells and population size. All that is very important to understand. Here you can see the December, there's not many bees, then it started growing, then it starts being so big, it's going to swarm, then it goes back down and you have a low population again until the cycle starts over again. So it's important to remember that you have to be mindful of the unintended consequences of your actions when you intervene in the hives. This is, for example, Texas. There's a period of expansion at the beginning and a period of contraction after the forage dies down. each year it repeats. So the other thing that's very important to understand is what a healthy colony looks like. So you need to be able to read your frames or your combs and identify the signs of a healthy colony. So on the left side, you have this brood pattern that's very tight. A lot of bees are coming. It's very healthy looking. Very few holes in the pattern. That looks great. On the right side, you have a pattern that's problematic. And you need to be able to tell, even though there's a lot of bees on here, that it's problematic because it is spotty, you have a lot of holes, a lot of things are happening here that could be a sign of problem. And you have to understand that a pattern like this is not always a problem. It could be because a lot of nectar is coming in. It could be because there's a lot of food that is coming in, or there's hygienic behavior on the bees where they're removing diseased bees, and it's a good thing. But that also means that you could have disease problems or mite problems or inbreeding with poor genetics. And so keep an eye on this. And when you see the pattern on the right, start looking around for other signs of issues and try to understand what's causing it. That's very important. But it's based on your knowledge and your education, as well as your experience. Everybody has heard about one of the most important pests of honeybees, which is the varroa mites, the varroa destructor, like a lot of people like to call it. And very often the sign of an infestation is an unhealthy looking brood with a lot of diseased bees. It looks like European foul brood, which doesn't look very healthy here. You can also potentially see shriveled wings for the deformed wing virus. And you can maybe, when the infestation is really bad, see mites on the bees and definitely on the pupae under capping if you open them up. The cycle is very important to understand. The queen lays an egg, which turns into a larvae. And right before it is capped, the mama mite, the mother mite, goes in and buries herself under the capping to reproduce under the capping and come out with two daughters, one or two daughters, to increase the number of mites in the population. And you have a seasonal aspect to that. Obviously, the blue is the bee population, that cycle where it grows to the population peak and then starts back down. If you have poor genetics and a problem with mites, that orange line, which is the mite population, will start growing with the brood. And once the bee population start decreasing, you might end up having the colony overpowered by a still growing population of mites, and that can cause crashes. So understanding that the varroa mites cycles are very tied to the brood cycles of the colony is very important. That means brood breaks matter. That means if you feed your bees constantly, you're breeding mites. So that's something to keep in mind. One of the signs of mite problems, it's parasitic mite syndrome. It looks like this. At first glance, this frame, this comb looks okay. There's bees, there's brood, it looks okay. But if you look a little bit closer, you start identifying diseased larvae, melted larvae, chewed up larvae that are not looking healthy, and uncapped larvae. That's a sign of problems. You also start seeing deformed wing virus, the shriveled wings. And by the way, I don't know if you saw, but that comb also has a queen on it. So you have to be very observant and be able to recognize signs of problems. That's level 1 with the education and knowledge. I will not talk about European foul brood in details, but that's another thing that you need to be able to recognize in your education, and you need to learn the symptoms for that, those disease-looking larvae. But know that European foul brood is not a bad thing per se. It usually is a problem from an imbalance of nurse bees to brood ratio. So basically you have too much brood, too many babies, and not enough nurse bees to feed them. And so the colony is stressed, the brood is stressed and gets diseased. But as soon as you get an influx of forage during your nectar flow, you have a lot more food coming in, and that usually takes care of the problem on its own. A natural way to intervene, or relatively natural way to intervene if you want to help your bees, is you can add more nurse bees. You can also bring the colony into a smaller box, and you can feed some sugar syrup if you believe in sugar syrup. And if a problem, the problem persists, continues, then you can potentially requeen with better genetics that will bring a healthier colony with a higher population. I don't know if you have small hive beetles in Cyprus. I would assume you do. So that's another pest that you need to know of and understand the life cycle of. Those little black scarabs, I don't know how you said in Greek, maybe coleopter, I don't know. But they're in the hives and they take advantage of weaker hives to lay eggs and eat the honey and the protein, and they can ruin your colony's food storage to a point that is so bad that maybe the bees will all leave altogether. It can kill your colony. But it is a symptom of another problem, of an underlying problem. And the cycle of the small hive beetles is very important to understand, so you can naturally stop it from becoming a big problem. So the cycle is a beetle walks into a hive that's not very well protected because it's potentially weaker. It hides into cracks and crevices, and if it's allowed to reproduce, you're going to have a lot more. The frame hives have more places for the beetles to hide. So if you're working with a top bar hive, for example, it will make it less of a problem. The beetles lay eggs on honey and pollen, and if the colony is not strong enough to remove those, the larvae will start eating through the resources. And then when they're big enough, they come out of the hive and go into the ground under the hive and pupate, transform into an adult. So knowing this, you have two main ways to prevent the problem from being bad, is keep dry ground under the hives, maybe some sand, maybe some crushed granite, something that is going to stop the beetles, the larvae, from digging into the ground and transforming into an adult. The other thing is to keep large populations of a healthy colony and allow the bees to cover all the comb so they can protect it and get rid of the larvae before they become a problem. So that's why it's important to understand and have the knowledge and the education for this as well. The one thing I wanted to mention is small hive beetles, varroa mites, diseases, they're a secondary problem. They're a symptom of a bigger underlying issue, usually bad genetics, bad nutrition, stress, and things that are maybe queens that are poorly mated, that are not good quality. And that's what causes the problems with mites, with beetles, with disease, and everything else. So speaking of that, that's why it's important to have good genetics and good queens. And that's the cultural control, the level 2 of the pyramid. Does anybody have any questions? Am I going too fast? Let me know if I am, okay? Okay, so cultural control. Always use good queens. And what does it mean? It means good local queens, survivor that is strong without medication. Make sure they are not inbred. Make sure they've got hybrid vigor. They are very diverse genetics, and they mate with a lot of drones of different genetics. The queens need to be well fed. They need to be fat queens. They need to be well mated with many drones of different genetics. And also they need to be well established if you buy them. That's something very American. A lot of people sell queens, but harvest them before they're ready. You also want to keep strong colonies. We were talking about small hive beetles. Strong colonies help keeping pests at bay. It protects the colony from pests. It also allows them to forage and get food more efficiently. You want to allow brood breaks. A lot of beekeepers in the United States try to stop brood break, meaning no brood, no babies for a while. The cycle of the colony, they increase in population. So there's a lot of babies in the spring, and in the summer, they stop rearing babies. And that's a brood break. And in the winter, there's no brood. That's another brood break. When there's no forage, no nectar, no pollen, there's no babies. And that's good. You don't want to feed your bees to prevent the brood breaks. You don't want to keep feeding them, because then you have brood all the time. And that's stressful. That's not following the natural cycles. And that breeds a lot of mites. The other thing, sorry about that. Hang on a second. Where did it go? There it goes. The other thing that's important is to keep a clean brood's nest. Brood is where the babies are. You need to take out old comb that's dark and black and nasty. Take it out, rotate it out on a 3 to 5 year cycle. You want to keep that nursery clean and healthy. You want to keep natural comb to increase your chances of a healthy colony. So every single thing that you do is a tool in your bag to help the colony be healthy. You don't have to use all those tools, but the more tools you use, the stronger and the healthier your colonies are going to be naturally. So natural comb is very important, and we will talk about that in a minute. You also want to minimize stress. Don't open your hives all the time. Don't go through all the combs, all the frames all the time. Don't leave them open for too long. That's very stressful for the colonies. And just like we get sick when we're stressed, because it challenges our immune system, the stress on the colony makes them more vulnerable to diseases because their immune system is under attack. And another cultural control is to use sanitation. Obviously, if you have a colony that's sick, don't transfer combs to another colony because you're going to spread the disease. If you have a colony that's sick, don't use the tools that you were using to inspect the colonies on another colony without first disinfecting them. Don't donate comb from a colony that's infested with a lot of mites to another colony, because you're going to give them more mites. That's sanitation. And make sure your bees are well fed. That's another stress, nutritional stress. You want to make sure that they're not starving, because that's going to be a problem, and you can intervene and make sure that you help them that way if it's needed. So I talk about local stock all the time. In the United States, you can buy bees. You can buy bees from different states, different locations. You can transport bees and buy packages and nukes and order queens from Hawaii, from another country. But what is important is local bees. And so it's important for you to get local stock to increase your chances of success. And you can do that by catching swarms. That's a very good way to get local stock. Or you could do cutouts. When you have bees in a wall, you can cut the wall and take the bees. It's very technical. It's not for the beginner, but it's a very good way to get other local bees. And if you have local bees, or somebody you know has local bees, you can get a split, a baby colony from it to get you started. I promised I was going to talk about natural wax. I don't recommend plastic foundation like we use in the United States, and I don't recommend any foundation. Wax is very important because it's basically it sucks in chemicals. It holds chemicals and accumulates chemicals, and it can be used by the bees for communication and history, but it also sucks out toxins from the colony and from the honey. And the problem, if you use chemicals that mix with the wax, those accumulate in the wax, and they can cause a lot of problems over time. In some cases, those chemicals mixed with pesticides that the farmer down the road is using for its crops can combine and make an explosion of bad chemicals in the hive that can kill your colony. So if you don't put the chemicals in your colony, you've already helped your colony defend itself against the pesticide more. The other thing is that wax, the comb, is the information highway for the bees. They dance on the surface of the comb and they create vibrations to communicate, a little bit like a drum. And those vibrations, if you have plastic foundation in the wax, they're muffled. They don't really carry the vibrations, and they decrease the efficiency of communication for the colony, which is bad for foraging and collecting food. And the other very important thing for the natural wax is that it is the cell sizes, the size of cells that the bees need. Large cells for the boys or for nectar and honey, and smaller cells for the girls and queen cells. And the bees get to choose what makes their colony the healthiest. If we stop them, we are preventing them from being as healthy as they can be. So in a natural comb without foundation, you can see drone cells right here, queen cells, worker cells. You can see different size cells, and the bees love to build different size cells. If we give them plastic foundation or wax foundation to start, we're putting them in a straight jacket, and we're giving them a cell size that's not what they need. And usually it's too big. And so because it's too big, it makes bigger worker bees, and it also gives the mites more time to develop. And so it makes the mite problem worse. So that's something to keep in mind. Take a look at the picture on the top right. That is an open air natural colony of bees. And you can notice that they built their combs from the roof. And then they go down and they go sideways. They never build on top of that roof, above that roof. They always go down and sideways. So that's important for the types of hives. If you put an empty box on top of a Langstroth hives, you've introduced an empty space that's very unnatural for the bees and very stressful for the bees. So keep that in mind. It's also important for cultural level to understand that the land can only carry so many colonies for them to find enough food. It's called intensity. The intensity on this field is very, very high. There's too many colonies. That means they're competing for food, and there's not enough food for everybody, which is why commercial beekeepers feed their bees. But if you don't have too many bees on your land, you don't have to feed your bees. The bees find their own food. And the carrying capacity is the number of colonies you can keep healthy in a specific location without them starving or without them being stressed for lack of food. So that was the cultural control level. And that these two, the education and the cultural, are the most important steps. That's what you need to focus a lot of effort onto to be successful naturally. Let's talk about the third level, which is mechanical. Also an acceptable level of intervention for natural beekeeping. Basically, you want to prevent the entry of pests to minimize their population so they don't become a nuisance to the colony. So you want equipment in good physical repair. You don't want hives that are falling apart, that have cracks, that have openings, that have screen bottom boards. All that is going to be an issue and is going to be a problem for the pests. If you can, use wood that's roughly cut, that has bumps and crevices, because the bees will be encouraged to cover it with propolis, and that's their immune system. So the more propolis, the stronger the immune system of the colony. So rough cut wood is better than smooth wood. You also want, on the mechanical prevention, use small entrances. You don't want big entrances. You don't want cross ventilation. You want to let the bees guard their small entrance and protect their colony from intruders. You can also use mechanical traps at this level. Oil traps for the beetles. You can use sticky boards to catch the mites under the colony if you want to. There's various things that you can do. We don't use mechanical traps because we've done everything else, and that's enough for us. But that's an option as well. And then you can use barriers. At the entrance, you can have specific entrance reducers. You can have rubber screens to prevent robbing from other colonies or to protect the colonies from wasps or hornets, like the Asian hornets. So that's part of the mechanical level of intervention. Also part of the mechanical level of intervention are powder sugar applications, drone culling, basically take out the drone cells, and screen bottom boards. But I don't recommend these three at all for various reasons. If you have questions, I can get into more details about that. But just for now, keep in mind, I don't recommend those. Another mechanical step that you can take to help your colonies is insulation and thickness of the wood. So I know that a lot of people are using insulation, but the type of wood also matters, and the thickness of the wood also matters. And you can also use wool in the walls. You can do all kinds of things. Thickness of the wood, twice as thick, is going to be better insulation and better thermal mass. Thermal mass is important because it absorbs a lot of the sharp changes in temperature that are stressful to the colony. So if you have more wood, like in a tree, those changes are not fast and strong. They're very small and take a long time, which means the colony is not suffering from them. So thicker wood is another mechanical intervention for IPM. This is one of the small hive beetle traps. This is an entrance to prevent small hive beetles. This is a disc entrance reducer. This is another style. That's another style of entrance reducer. Another style of gate or mechanical entrance. You can decrease entrances with various means, or, you know, corks, grass, wood, all kinds of things. These are examples of rubber screens. These are other rubber screens that are very low tech, low technical. It's very easy to make. So that's the mechanical level of IPM, and this is where we usually stop. But there's another level that potentially you could use, is the level 4, which is biological. We don't use that step because we don't need to. If you've done the most of the 3 lower levels, you should be good. And biological is also harder to implement, and there's less research that it works. So things like predators, parasites, pathogens, and fungi, microbes, nematodes, pseudoscorpions that are predators of mites, and also bacillus that prevent wax moths from growing onto the comb. All that is biological intervention. It is very hard to maintain. It takes a lot of reapplication. It takes a lot of quantity, and the results are not always as efficient as they would be if you followed the other steps. So it doesn't hurt, but it's harder for this step to help the colony. So this is where we stop. We stop before the chemical intervention, because over time, when you raise bees without treatments, it produces stronger bees, right? If you treat your bees with chemicals, basically you're allowing weak bees to grow and reproduce. And you're also allowing the strong mites to reproduce. So weak bees, strong mites, not a good combo. So let's talk now about the level 5 of the IPM pyramid, the chemical intervention. And that's the toxic one. It should be kept as a last resort, not as a prophylactic first line of intervention by any means. And I would argue it should not be used at all, because if you have to resort to this, that means you don't have good bees, or you didn't do the things you were supposed to do at the beginning. And if you don't have good bees, why try to keep them alive with chemicals so that they can multiply? It doesn't make any sense to me. At this point, you're better off letting the colonies just requeen them, get rid of them, don't just cull the weak and keep the strong. Grow more strong bees and let the weak die. So what are those chemicals? Well, believe it or not, essential oils are part of the toxic interventions. Things like thymol or any essential oils, that's going to have problems. It's called soft chemicals, but it still permeates the wax. The wax will absorb those oils. Those oils will also interfere with the pheromones, the communication messages from the colony. And so they are toxic to the colony. They are not good for the bees. The bees can also eat those oils, and it messes their gut, their microbiome. The acids, all the acids, the organic quote unquote acids, there's formic acid, oxalic acid, hop beta acids, all those are very, very caustic, and they have lethal effects on the adult bees, the queens, the fertility and fecundity of the queens and the drones. And they also, studies show, have lethal effects on the larvae. They're not supposed to leave residue in the wax, but they can accumulate over time. They're very caustic and very dangerous to use for humans. Synthetic chemicals, those are the bad ones. They're synthesized by men, and they don't exist in nature, and they're very strong, and mites develop resistance. They're no longer as efficient, and they contaminate your wax comb. So I would stay away from all of these, but especially these synthetic chemicals. Antibiotics, again, if you have heard about antibiotic resistance, that's not something that you want to use prophylactically. So I would stay from antibiotics as well. They don't really help with a lot of diseases, and they can get into your honey. What about organic treatments? Those are organic only in name. It doesn't mean they're safe, and it's the dose, the concentration that makes the poison. So keep that in mind. They also have problems associated. This is a picture of all the various chemical and organic controls. Oxalic acid is wood bleach. And in the US, people use a battery and a vaporizer to basically create vapors in the hives. And to apply a lot of the organic acid treatments, you have to have goggles to protect your eyes, respirators to protect your lungs, and coverings for your skin, because they're very caustic and can destroy your lungs and your skin. So I don't know about you. I don't want that on me, and I don't want that on my bees or in my honey, right? None of this stuff. All of those treatments have negative effects on the bees. They kill bees, they kill queens, they leave residue, they have all kinds of problems here. This is a study from Cornell University. There's all kinds of reasons why it's bad for beekeeping. These are all the treatments that are sold in the United States and all the problems that are associated with some of these. This is a very well-known publication that is used in the United States to discuss treatments and their effects and efficacy. And apparently the best way to, one of the best ways to take care of problems when they've gone too bad for too long is to requeen. That doesn't include treatments. Treatments can be 0 to 30 to 41% efficient temporarily, and requeening is permanent and has much higher success anyway. So why even use treatments? So what I always tell people is don't flip the IPM pyramid on its head. Don't start with the chemicals and then keep the education and the cultural controls for later. No, you want to increase your work by learning. You want to learn more. You want to spend more work learning, and you also want to avoid toxicity. So the goal is to prevent instead of intervene. You want prevention, not intervention. And if you respect the first 3 levels of the IPM pyramid, you should have bees that are capable of thriving without having to do anything else. So that's prevention. So don't flip that pyramid on its head. That's very important. Prophylactic treatments is bad for everybody. And that's basically an argument to decrease toxicity in the hives and to let the bees do what they do best, to allow them and enable them by understanding their biology to be healthy and protect themselves from pests and diseases. This is just a kind of a statement from Rob Manley that shows basically we mess with the bees too much. We go in there too much, we treat them, we do all kinds of things, we manipulate them. And if only we left them alone, maybe they would be a lot healthier. So what to keep in mind? Well, you want to start with good bees and good queens. That's very, very important. That's without that, you cannot be successful. Your colonies will not thrive. You have to respect and understand the colony's life cycles. Don't go against nature. Don't force production. Don't push the bees to do things when they're not ready to do that. That means avoid feedings, avoid, splitting at the wrong time. Know what a colony looks like when it's healthy at different times of the year. A colony is not static, it changes. So you have to understand what's going on in a colony and be able to recognize if there's no brood in a dearth, that's okay. It's normal. If there's no brood in a nectar flow, there's a problem. If there's brood in your colony, you have a queen. If you have no brood, you might have a queen. If it's a dearth, there's no food, the queen might stop laying. That doesn't mean that's a problem. Number 4, know how to recognize signs of issues early by educating yourself and understanding the pests and the diseases. Number 5, intervene before it's too far advanced. Prevent, I would even say, prevent, then intervene before it's too late. Number 6, keep the stress to a minimum. And that includes you, the beekeeper. Don't stress your bees. Number 7, choose your equipment wisely. And I can talk about how certain styles of hives are more in tune with the nature of bees and less stressful for them. Number 8, clean natural comb matters. So rotate old comb and use natural wax comb, not foundation. Number 9, shoot for tolerance and strong bees that can thrive in the presence of mites, in the presence of beetles, and that can fend off the diseases that they transfer. Number 10, find successful treatment-free mentors, people that know how to do this without relying on to treatments and chemicals. They will share their knowledge and you will learn how to keep your bees more naturally. So those are the 10 commandments of basically doing smart integrated pest management, keeping your bees more naturally and not using chemical interventions. Does anybody have any questions? Let me see, I have something in the chat maybe. We don't have small hive beetles in Cyprus. Thank you. That's great for you guys. I'm surprised because they come from North Africa and you guys are not that far. So I'm very surprised that we have small hive beetles and you guys don't have them, but that's good to know. And good for you. That's great. Does anybody else have questions? I know I tried to speak slow, but that might not have been slow enough. So feel free to jump.
Hello, Natalie, can you hear me?
Yes.
The presentation was so nice. In Cyprus, we don't, as I wrote there, we don't have a small hive beetles. And also, we've been lately, and we are going also tomorrow. Some professors are coming from Greece, and they said that so many years they haven't seen European foul brood in Cyprus.
That's great. That means your bees are healthy. Yeah.
Also, another thing, because of the weather, the queen never stops laying eggs completely, ever.
Oh, good. No bird breaks.
That's I think it's not good, because as you said, it's good to have a
bird break.
A stop
Okay.
for cleaning the varroa.
Correct.
That's another minus. This is you know what I mean.
Absolutely. If they always have brood, that can be a problem with varroa. But if there's only a little bit of brood, that's okay too. It's not quite a complete brood break, but it slows down the reproduction of the varroa mites too. And Dimitri, ask if other people have questions, but I can also talk about more things on beekeeping and the top-bar hives if you want.
You mean to talk now?
If you want, it's up to you. I don't know how much time you have.
We have endless time. We are drinking coffee.
Oh, very good, Polika.
In a coffee shop.
I wish I was there.
Listen, how long is gonna last the top-bar hive?
Maybe if I go fast, 30 minutes.
Can we do a 5 minutes break?
Yeah, absolutely. Do a 5-minute break.
Okay, we stay online, 5 minutes break, and we come back and we talk about the top-bar hive.
That sounds great. We can do that.
Because in Cyprus it's not so famous. My best friend is one of the few that is only top-bar hive keeper.
Oh, well then you're in for a treat.
You need to meet him.
Okay.
So 2-3 minutes break and we're back.
That sounds good. Ping me when you're ready.
All right, I'm gonna keep this on. Okay.
Sounds good. I will pause the recording. Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit about a different style of hive that we use a lot of, and I'm going to contrast it to regular Langstroth square boxes. I'm not going to talk about all kinds of hives. I'm just going to talk about these two real quick. So when you keep bees there's things to consider. Why are you keeping bees? Is it for pleasure? Is it for honey? Is it for money? Those are criteria that matters. So honey, you can have liquid honey from your hives, and you can use with the Langstroth square boxes an extractor. If you have a lot, that makes it faster. But if you have natural comb, what you can do is use simple kitchen utensils, you know, a strainer, a bucket, a pot, and crush it and strain it very easily. That's cheap. You have all that in your kitchen, and you don't need an expensive extractor. You don't need to store an expensive extractor, and it's a lot easier to get liquid honey that way. It also generates a lot of wax, right? Once the honey drains into your pot, you are left with a lot of wax. You can keep your honey in different style containers. I highly recommend a wide mouth, a wide opening like this one, that one, this one, but not a small opening because it's hard to reach the honey. And I recommend no plastic. I think that glass is better for honey. You can also make creamed honey, which is whipped or spun. And you can also make comb honey. So liquid honey, you can sell it for, say, I don't know, $10 a pound. Comb honey, you can sell for $20 a pound, twice as much. And it's not as much work. You just cut it and put it in a box or butcher paper. And it's a delicacy. It's very sought after. And if you want to make more money from honey, then comb honey is a better product. Chunk honey, for those of you who don't know, is when you put chunks of wax of comb into liquid honey. I always recommend freezing your honey so it doesn't crystallize and stays fresh. And especially that's important for chunk honey, by the way. Are your goals to make beeswax products? Beeswax sells for a lot more than honey, actually. And so it's a good way to make a living. And you can make candles, beeswax wraps, salves, lip balms, all kinds of things. You can even sell it if you don't use chemical treatments for a lot more. So it's important to define your goals and your needs when choosing a hive. And are you going to be commercials? Are you going to transport hives? Are you going to feed, treat, and repeat? Are you going to be large scale and intensive? Or are you doing it at a smaller scale and more naturally and without having to feed your bees and transport them? So commercial beekeeping uses Langstroth because they do transport bees across the country in the United States. They put them on big trucks, they transport them through America, and they have to do that early in January. So they feed and syrup and pollen, and they treat, and they keep them in very stressful conditions. But they use Langstroth boxes. These are Langstroth hives, stackable, vertical, square boxes with frames. And they use extractors to pull out the honey. In the US, most of us are backyard beekeepers, 94%, and 1% are commercial, but they own most of the hives in the United States. As a backyard beekeeper, we tell our students they don't have to keep their bees like commercial beekeepers do. So they have the luxury to use horizontal hives. In nature, we talked about the comb being built from the roof down and sideways. It's true in vertical and horizontal configurations. We talked about the wax, so I'm not going to talk about that. 90% of the bees of the colonies in structures choose horizontal configurations. That's their preference. Horizontal is a lot easier because it follows just one axis, just a horizontal axis. Vertical follows a little bit of horizontal and a lot of vertical. So it's more complex. With the bee space, as long as you respect bee space, you have a choice of different styles of hives. And we're going to talk about Langstroth briefly with all the boxes, you know, bottom board, deep box for brood, another deep, medium, covers. There's a lot of parts and it's very complicated. And I cannot build those. They're expensive, they break, you depend on a supplier and on their prices. So the management is complex, they're expensive, they're also super heavy. We'll talk about that. So vertical beekeeping is usually with Langstroth, and you have frames that are very expensive, hard to make, take time to assemble, they break easily. Boxes are not always compatible. If they're not the same size boxes, you can't use them together. If you don't have the same size frames for the right size box, you can't use them either. So it's standardized, but it's not. It's interchangeable, but it's not. This is pictures of foundation that I was talking about. The one on the left is plastic foundation with the cells predefined, and the one in the center is wax foundation. So that's what it looks like, foundation. We talked about it in the previous one. One of my biggest problem with vertical beekeeping is the weight and the complications. So they can weigh a very heavy weight, and they can spread between boxes. The brood can spread between boxes. The bees can, if they run out of space, put honey at the top that's going to leak when you crack the lid open. When you crack a lid open, you expose the entire colony. You disrupt their temperatures, their humidity levels, and their volatile compounds of propolis, and they usually get upset very quickly. Plus, it's intimidating for beginner beekeepers. This is the weight of the honey boxes. So pounds are 2.5 kilos, right? Or about. In a big box, you can have up to 250, no, that's not it. 2.5 pounds in a kilo. So you divide by 2, you can have up to 40 something kilos, 100 pounds in a deep, 60 pounds in a medium. And so it adds up really fast, and you're twisting, bending, lifting, it's back breaking. Management is done horizontally and vertically. It's complicated. You have to have the right number of frames for the boxes, and you always have extra or not enough. You have to switch boxes, and you have to store a lot of equipment during the off season. Lots of boxes, lots of frames. It takes over your garage. Those boxes are very fragile. They don't last very long. They break, they weather, and they come with a lot of frames that take a lot of space. If you don't protect the comb, you end up with wax moths, mice. That's a problem. The thermodynamics are bad because in the winter, it's harder for the bees to stay warm because of the chimney effect. The bees are at the bottom, heat rises and comes out at the top, or condensation is created at the top and drips on the bees. In the summer, it's the opposite problem. It's harder for the bees to stay cool. So that's kind of a concern with vertical management in general. Now let's talk about horizontal tabar hives. That's a concept that's been around since ancient Greece, and it was created by the Greeks, and we are now using it as a tool for horizontal beekeeping. So with horizontal beekeeping, no heavy lifting, no back breaking. The bees are in horizontal tabar hives, and the principles are, you see the orange on the bottom right, that's an entrance. It's at the bottom end of the hive near the floor, and all the bars at the top are touching. And because of the bee space, the bees are building one comb per bar. So that makes it easy to pull the combs with each bar and inspect them. And you only use basically a bar, and the bees build the comb on it. So these are pictures of top bar combs, and you can see bottom right, it recreates the natural way of the bees to build their nest that we saw before. You end up with lots of beautiful natural wax comb that you can harvest and cut comb, the comb, and serve it in the comb. That's a delicacy, and again, very prized. So that's kind of like the summary about the tabar hives. This is how it works. So in nature, you have that horizontal expansion with some honey at the front, pollen, the brood's nest, pollen, and then the extra honey in the back. This is how it works with the horizontal expansion. Your entrance is going to be on bottom left here. Colony moves in, and the swarm starts to build comb, each on one bar. And you have the brood's nest that expands and grows. And once it reaches the right size, they're going to start building more comb to store honey in the back of the hive. So at the front, one comb of honey, pollen comb, brood, which is the babies, then pollen again to feed the babies. And then after that, it's going to be extra surplus that the bees don't need, but they store anyway for honey. And that's what we can harvest. So the honey stores are in the back, and these you open from the back, 1 bar, 2 bars, 3 bars, and then you start moving the bars, you access the honey stores. You can harvest those very easily without the bees knowing you're there, without stressing the bees, because you don't go through the bird's nest. And then if you want to inspect for health, you can keep moving the honey to the back and reach the edge of your bird's nest, first brood comb, to see if the colony is healthy. And then you're done. You can close everything back. You didn't disrupt the brood's nest, and your colony is not stressed out. So that's the bird's nest, that's the entrance, pollen and honey in the back. In the spring, when a lot of food comes in, there's a huge nectar flow, and the colony expands to the back of the hive. When there's no food, the colony contracts back towards the front of the hive. So the bird's nest expands and contracts with the nectar flow. All of it is done at waist height, by the way. This is what it looks like with some of those pictures. This is what an upside down version with no bees looks like. So we talked about natural wax. Again, it's good for the bees. You don't have to deal with expensive frames, cumbersome frames, and you don't have to use that expensive and toxic foundation that can create problems. There's no expensive extractor, and you end up with healthier and calmer bees because you're not stressing them. If you have issues with cross combing, you have to kind of manage it to prevent that from happening. But if that's a problem, you can use repair bars to fix cross combing and rehang combs that are problematic. You can put 2 colonies in one hive. Here with a center partition and entrances on both sides, you can end up with 2 colonies, smaller ones, and then grow as you need. If one colony gets bigger, you can move one of them into another hive, remove the central partition, and give them the whole box for a larger single colony and more honey production. They are very easy to work. A child can assemble them. They take 2 hours to build from scratch, and you can put 2 colonies in them. They're very cheap to build. There's no heavy lifting. You work at the height that you need, your waist, and you don't have to bend and lift anything heavy. That makes it super easy and cheap and less intimidating. So I wanted to show you, these hives are very thick. They're twice the thickness of regular hives. And also the wall at the top is slanted, it's diagonal, because that means the bees don't get crushed between 2 flat surfaces. So it's less work, you don't cut it, and then you only have 1 point of contact. That wood is very thick, so high thermal efficiencies and thermal mass, and horizontal is better thermodynamics. When the cluster of bees is right under the honey, right under the bar, the heat rises, stops at the bars and spreads, keeps the honey warm on both sides in the winter. For the heat, you can have a rain cover that allows for a lot of airflow on top of the bars to protect them from too much heat and melting. You can flip those bars upside down and have both hands free to take pictures or work them. And Les Crowder works them with one hand. It's super easy to grab one bar with one end of a bar, and just if you have physical limitations, it's a lot easier to work those hives. Not going to talk about that. If you have a Langstroth, you can convert them, but mostly what I want to mention is that they are super easy to build with just very basic materials and tools. You need a few boards of wood, some screws, and the only more advanced tool you need is a table saw to cut the bars. These are the plans. It's basically 5 pieces of wood for the trough right there. A, B, C, that's 5 pieces. And then all the bars. If you want, you can add legs, or you can stand it on stands or a table or almost off the ground. This is what they look like for the plans. Our plans are available for free on our website, and I will give you the link at the end. But super easy to assemble and make in less than 2 hours from scratch. And this is kind of what they look like. You can make them with a fancy top or just keep them simple. There is on our website, you can scan this QR code with the photo, with the camera on your phone, or go to bee-mindful.com/plans and find the free plans, but also listen to this specific podcast episode on the Hive Jive that gives a lot of information on the reasons why we think those are the people's hive of the future, because they're cheap, easy to make, simple to manage, and allows people of all physical abilities and financial means to keep bees very easily. That's it. So that was kind of what I wanted to mention about the horizontal top-bar hives. Do you guys have questions? Dimitri.
I was trying to unmute. All this time I was trying to unmute because I'm with the mobile.
Oh, I see. You have to find the button.
Natalie, honestly, you know, I don't want to, it was the best, was very interesting, was something new. I believe, especially the top bars, most of the Cypriot fellows first time realize that there is top bar. And top bar is the oldest beehive. Now is the oldest beehive. How many years?
I mean, thousands of years. The concept, the Greeks created the concept thousands of years ago. So it's not a new concept, but it's very popular right now because it's simple and easy and cheap, and it's good for the bees.
Is a friend here. He's asking how you treat your lumber, your wood. How you treat?
I don't treat with anything. It's just simple pine, or if you can use reclaimed wood, old wood, but no painting inside and no treatments. The legs,
outside.
The legs, if you want the legs to be treated, it can be because it lasts longer, but not where the bees are. Nothing in contact with the bees.
Outside, you put watercolor.
You can. On the outside, you can put watercolors, but not inside the hive.
So the big question is, what is going to be the next lecture?
You tell me. You tell me.
You tell me all you have.
Yeah.
You tell me. Give me an idea.
Oh, I can talk about. I can give you more info on how to make those top-bar hives. I can talk about conversion. I can talk about. You putting me on the spot. I don't know. All kinds of things. Anything you need information on, I can put it together. Joanna, you're welcome. She says it was very interesting. Thank you very much. So you're welcome.
We can talk about split.
Oh yes, we can talk about splits.
Yeah, the kinds of split, the many kinds of splits.
You know what we can talk about? Apiary increases, how to multiply the number of hives that you want in your apiary.
It's a deal.
Okay, that sounds
so
good.
We talk together and we put it for next month.
Yes, if you want, or maybe a little bit further down the road. I know it's late and it's a lot of information. Did I speak too fast, do you think?
No, it was perfect.
Okay, good. Maria, you're welcome. Yes. So yeah, let me know, and then you can also contact me at be-mindful.com with questions, and Dimitri can give you my contact information.
Thank you very, very much. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Very good. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Hopefully it was helpful for your beekeeping education and knowledge. And if you have questions, just let me know. I'll be happy to help out.
And also, you owe me one of your t-shirts.
You like my t-shirts, huh?
I love it. I love it.
I designed the logo. I designed that logo. I need to send you a t-shirt.
It's so simple and so with meaning. You're be mindful. Everybody discuss it here.
Oh yes, it's being mindful of the bees, being mindful of people and their circumstances, being mindful of nature, potentially meditation and helping people with trauma and doing community outreach. It's all being mindful. So that
So-
bee is doing yoga.
So thank you so much. So the next lecture is going to be how to expand.
Yes, yes.
A friend here is saying that you come to Cyprus.
I want to, I want to, I've been to Cyprus, you know that, all right?
It's listen, when we promote and the top bar hive, which I'm going to, I told you ages ago, this is my target. Definitely you're going to come.
Very good. Lemesos.
Lemesos.
Lemesos ya panda.
Εντάξει, Νάταλη μου, thank you very much. Παιδιά, ευχαριστώ όλους για τη συμμετοχή σας. Μπορείτε να μου γράψετε σε μένα τα σχόλια σας και έχουμε κλείσει ραντεβού τον επόμενο μήνα πώς θα απολύνουμε τα μελίσια μας, να το πω έτσι απλά και κυπριακά. Να μας πείτε τις τεχνικές τις δικές της. Νάταλη μου, I just said what we are going to do.
Right.
So in behalf of the Wild Beast Tribe and the friends here, I like to thank you so much. It's been years I wanted to do that. We talk about it 2-3 years now.
Yes, that's right. We're making it happen. Thanks to Wild Beast Tribe.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Καλή νύχτα και θα τα πούμε μετά. Παιδάκι μου, πολλά φιλάκια.
Πολλά, καλή νύχτα.
Πολλά.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ.
Ευχαριστώ. Καλή νύχτα, ονείχα αγγελικά. Θα τα πούμε μετά. Bye, guys.